Close your eyes and picture this. You wake up every day before sunrise. You grab your tools, you walk to the same spot, and you spend hours, days, entire years of your life building something. Digging into the earth with precise, deliberate accuracy. Following a plan someone handed down to you, but one you will never see in its entirety. You will die without knowing how it turned out. Your children will carry on the work, and their children after them. None of them will ever see the finished result. Not because the work was never completed, but because what you are all creating can only be seen from a place no human being in your time could ever reach. Now open your eyes. This is not a made-up story. This actually happened, right here in the Amazon, over 2,000 years ago. And to this day, no scientist in the world has been able to fully explain how or why. Welcome, explorer! Today we're going to uncover some of the secrets hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest. 6 discoveries in the Amazon jungle that will rewrite history. The largest forest on Earth, covering millions of square kilometers, for centuries called empty and primitive. But hidden by the jungle, beneath the trees, inside the rivers, and carved into the land itself, there is a story that was buried. Civilizations that built cities, monuments, roads, and entire engineering systems that defy everything we know about what was possible without metal, without writing, and without the wheel. Come with me. I'm Curious Chris, and I'll be your guide on this expedition through the mysteries and secrets of the Amazon rainforest. The geoglyphs of the Amazon. Starting in the 1980s, when large stretches of the Amazon rainforest began to be cleared for agriculture and ranching, satellite images revealed something no ground expedition had ever found. Perfect geometric shapes drawn directly into the earth. Circles as precise as compass-drawn lines. Squares with exactly 90-degree corners. Hexagons stretching over 300 meters across. Larger than many football stadiums. These structures were massive, symmetrical, and completely invisible to anyone standing inside the forest. Researchers confirmed that you could pass within 15 meters of one and have no idea it was there. Only from at least 90 meters in the air does the full pattern reveal itself, as if the Earth were keeping a secret that only the sky has permission to know. By 2021, more than 450 structures had been catalogued, concentrated primarily in what is now the state of Acre, 450, in the areas that have already been cleared. What keeps scientists up at night isn't the size, it's the precision. The angles are exact across every single one. The proportions repeat with remarkable consistency across hundreds of structures built in different locations, by different groups, with no known communication network between them. Modern surveyors who analyzed these measurements openly acknowledged that the geometric consistency is extraordinary, even by today's standards. Now think about what that actually means. People living inside a dense jungle, without satellites, without drones, without a single instrument that modern engineering considers essential, produced shapes that rival what we can achieve today. And the forest was already there when they built them. From inside it, you can't see more than a few dozen meters in any direction. There was no hill high enough, no known elevated platform, nothing that could have given these builders an aerial view of what they were creating. That leads us to a conclusion that science still hasn't been able to fully process. These people were building something they would never see, executing a plan whose result was invisible to them. And they did it with a level of precision that we, with all our technology, recognize as extraordinary. Every explanation proposed has been either discarded or left open. Ceremonial sites? The scale doesn't fit. Territorial markers? The distribution follows no identifiable logic. Astronomical calendars? The alignments don't hold up. We don't know what they were for. We don't know how they transmitted the design without writing. We only know that they were built with staggering precision by people who never saw the finished product, and that they were found only where the forest has been removed. What still lies hidden beneath the rest is a question no one has the courage to answer. 3 questions hang over these geoglyphs, still unanswered to this day. If the builders couldn't see the complete shape from the ground, who was directing each stage of construction? If these structures communicated something, who were they designed for? And from what vantage point were they meant to be read? And if 450 were found, only in areas already cleared, how many more are waiting in silence beneath the untouched forest? The Amazon is hiding answers we've barely begun to look for. And the next secret we're about to reveal is even older than these geoglyphs. So old, in fact, that when it was discovered, it forced science to sit down and admit that the story we'd been telling about how human beings first arrived here might be completely wrong. Rock paintings from 11,200 years ago. The year was 1996. Archaeologist Anna Roosevelt, great-great-granddaughter of former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, entered a cave in the interior of the state of Pará called Caverna de Pedra Pintada. What she found inside didn't just add a new site to the archaeological map. It destroyed an entire model. A model that had governed everything we thought we knew about when and how human beings first arrived in the Americas. The paintings on the walls of that cave were 11,200 years old. And that was a massive problem, because according to the dominant theory, the people who made those paintings simply shouldn't have been there. To understand the scale of the problem, you need to know the theory. For decades, the official model of the peopling of the Americas held the following. The first humans crossed from Siberia into Alaska over a land bridge that existed during the last ice age, moved down through North America, crossed Central America, and eventually reached South America. That process took millennia. And according to the timeline scientists had assembled, the first humans wouldn't have reached the deep interior of the Amazon more than a few thousand years ago. 11,200 years ago, according to that model, the Amazon should have been empty. But Anna Roosevelt didn't find an empty cave. She found walls covered in art, fish painted with precise anatomical detail, complex geometric shapes, and alongside the paintings, fish bones, seeds, and tools dated to the same period. This wasn't a passing group of hunters on the move. This was a settled people, with culture, with an organized food supply, with art, already living there. What happened after the discovery says as much as the discovery itself. The academic response was immediate and hostile. Critics said the dating was contaminated, that the stratigraphy had been misread, that the samples were collected incorrectly. Anna Roosevelt defended every detail of her methodology in public. The debate dragged on for more than 25 years. To this day, there is no formal consensus. The official model was quietly adjusted to allow for slightly earlier arrivals to the continent, but not enough to absorb what Caverna de Pedra Pintada demands. Because if a people were settled in the Amazon 11,200 years ago, with art on the walls and fish on the table, they didn't arrive yesterday. They needed time to settle in, to develop culture, to learn which fish lived in that river, which means the arrival was even earlier than the date on the paintings. And here the hole gets deeper. If they arrived before the model says, which way did they come? The Bering Strait route doesn't add up. The timeline doesn't fit. The geography doesn't fit. Some researchers began looking at other possibilities: coastal routes along the Pacific, crossings of the South Atlantic, connections to Oceanian populations whose genetic material appears, mysteriously, in Amazonian indigenous peoples to this day. None of these alternative theories has reached consensus, but all of them exist because Caverna de Pedra Pintada opened a wound in the official model that never fully healed. And if the route is wrong, if the timeline is wrong, if the point of arrival is wrong, then everything we've built about who the first Americans were needs to be rewritten from scratch. The weight of what was found in that cave doesn't fade when you walk away from it. It stays, because if a people were settled in the Amazon 11,200 years ago, which route did they take if the Bering Strait doesn't add up? If the scientific community spent more than 25 years resisting this data, how many other equally unsettling sites were dismissed before anyone could build a solid case in their defense? And if there are even older paintings waiting beneath the forest floor, what will they reveal about a history we've insisted on telling in a way that may never have been true? What is clear is that the Amazon was inhabited far earlier than any official model admits, and the civilizations that grew here over millennia developed things that still leave us without answers. One of them flourished on an island in the middle of the Amazon River Delta, produced art so sophisticated that no archaeologist has been able to explain where it came from, and then vanished completely, leaving no heirs, no trace, as if it had never existed at all. The Marajoara civilization. Every year, without warning, without negotiation, the water comes. It doesn't ask permission. It advances slowly across the plains, swallowing fields, covering paths, erasing the line between river and land as though that distinction had never existed. You wake up, and the ground that was there yesterday is now underwater. The entire island turns into a brown, silent mirror that reflects the sky and hides everything else. And then, months later, the water recedes, the land returns, and the cycle begins again. This has been happening for millennia on Marajoara Island, in the state of Pará, a river island roughly the size of Switzerland, set in the middle of the Amazon Delta. Anyone who chose to live there would have to make a fundamental decision: fight that cycle or learn to exist within it. The Marajoara civilization did something that neither option fully describes. They built their entire lives above the water, on raised earthen platforms that defied the annual flooding through sheer engineering. They lived there for over 1,000 years, and they produced art so technically impossible to explain that when archaeologists first encountered it, the initial reaction wasn't admiration. It was deep confusion. Between 300 and 1300 CE, the Marajoara people raised hundreds of artificial mounds across the island's flood-prone plains. The largest of them, Teso dos Bichos, is 90 meters wide and 20 meters tall. Every cubic meter of earth was carried by hand, deposited with intention, compacted with purpose. This was no geographic accident. It was deliberate engineering on a scale that demanded generation after generation of organized labor. But it wasn't the engineering that stopped researchers in their tracks. It was what sat on top of those mounds: ceramic vessels, painted with geometric patterns of breathtaking visual complexity, modeled into human and animal forms with a technical mastery that implies decades of specialized training, passed from master to apprentice, refined across generations. The archaeologists who studied these pieces arrived at a conclusion that still echoes through the museums that house them. The Marajoara ceramic tradition is the most sophisticated in all of pre-Columbian America. And here is the problem that no one has been able to resolve. This tradition did not evolve. It did not emerge gradually from simpler forms produced by earlier cultures in the region. It appeared fully formed, completely developed, as if a mature, refined artistic tradition had been transplanted from somewhere else and planted on this flood-prone island in the middle of the Amazon Delta. There is no primitive version of Marajoara ceramics. There is no experimental phase. There is no rough draft. There is only the final work, complex, technically flawless, appearing out of nowhere. Researchers combed through neighboring cultures looking for parallels, for influences, for any trace that might suggest an origin. They found nothing comparable. The Marajoara tradition has no identifiable ancestor in any known culture from the surrounding region. It simply appeared, flourished for over 1,000 years, and then stopped. It stopped completely. The Marajoara civilization collapsed before Europeans arrived on the continent. No living indigenous tradition traces its direct lineage to the builders of those mounds. No oral history clearly preserves the name of this people. No descendant community carries the technical knowledge that produced those ceramics. They disappeared so completely that it's as if the delta had finally closed over them for good. What remains are the mounds, still standing above plains that flood every year. And the ceramics, distributed across museums throughout Brazil and around the world, staring back at us with their impossible geometric patterns, guarding a secret their creators took with them. We have the objects, we have the results, we do not have the story. Who were the Marajoara before they came to the island? And where did they bring a level of technical knowledge that no neighboring culture has ever shown signs of possessing? Why did they choose to build their entire civilization on land that sinks underwater every year, when solid ground was accessible nearby? And if an artistic tradition of that level of sophistication vanished without leaving a single traceable descendant in any surrounding culture, what happened to the people who carried that knowledge? The Amazon has no answers to these questions, only silence and objects too beautiful to have come from nowhere. And while we tried to decode that silence, modern technology was about to reveal something even more unsettling. Hidden not inside an island, but beneath an entire region of the Bolivian Amazon, invisible for 600 years, until a beam of laser light finally asked the right questions. 26 cities beneath the Bolivian jungle. Imagine a plane flying over the forest, firing millions of laser pulses per second toward the ground. Those pulses slip through the gaps between the leaves, hit the soil, and bounce back. A computer assembles a precise three-dimensional image of the terrain as though the trees simply didn't exist. It's like giving the forest an X-ray. And when that X-ray was applied to the territory of the Kasarabi people in Bolivia, what appeared on the screen left everyone in the room breathless. Streets, plazas, residential blocks, water management systems. And at the center of it all, a 22-meter pyramid flanked by ceremonial platforms. Everything connected by raised roads that crossed rivers and ravines with a geometric precision that modern engineers described as extraordinary. In 2022, researchers published the results of that survey in the scientific journal Nature. 26 cities, connected, organized, and completely unknown until that moment. 600 years. Sit with that number for a second. 600 years, hidden beneath the Bolivian jungle without anyone knowing it existed. Not partially hidden. Completely invisible. Archaeologists had studied the region for decades. Entire communities lived just a few kilometers from the ruins. Government agencies had mapped the territory, and no one saw a thing, because the forest doesn't allow it. It covers, consumes, digests, and returns earth where there was once a city, vegetation where there was once a plaza, hillside where there was once a pyramid. It took an airplane and a beam of laser light for the ground to finally surrender what it had been holding. It was all there, hidden beneath Bolivia, waiting. The Kasarabi people built this system between 500 and 1400 CE. Before 2022, they were known only through ceramic fragments. Their urban network covered more than 5,000 square kilometers of connected territory. The raised roads crossed natural obstacles without detour, without workaround, without yielding to the terrain. The hydraulic infrastructure reveals a deep understanding of the seasonal behavior of water. Reservoirs were positioned where the rain cycle required. Canals follow a logic that modern hydraulic engineers recognized as sophisticated. This was not built through trial and error. It was designed by people who understood the land with a depth that took generations to develop. And then, around 1400 CE, it stopped. The cities were abandoned. The forest moved in. And it erased everything so completely that 600 years later, not a single record of that civilization existed in any oral tradition belonging to the cultures that live in the region today. There is no collective memory of what was built. The collapse was so total that not even the memory survived. For decades, the dominant narrative held that the rainforest never supported large-scale urban development. The 26 Kasarabe cities disprove that narrative so thoroughly that there is no room for a middle ground. We were wrong, not partially, completely. If a civilization of that magnitude remained invisible until 2022, how many others are still sleeping beneath the canopy that laser surveys have yet to reach? If 5,000 square kilometers of urban infrastructure existed without our knowledge, how much of what we're calling virgin rainforest is actually a city? And if the Kasarabi people vanished without leaving a trace in any neighboring culture, what happened around 1400 CE that erased not just the people, but any memory that they had existed? The Bolivian Amazon gave up an enormous secret in 2022. But across the border, in Brazil, another secret had been discovered years earlier. A network of 20 cities perfectly aligned to the sun, with avenues wider than our highways, built without metal, without writing, and without the wheel. By a people who understood the sky in ways we still cannot fully explain. The city of Kuhikugu. Have you ever stopped to think about what it takes to build a city? A real city, with planned streets, with public spaces, with systems that function for thousands of people at the same time? Now multiply that by 20. 20 cities, all connected, all oriented toward the same point in the sky, all part of a single urban system planned as if they were one thing. Without metal, without writing, without the wheel. This is Kuhikugu, in the Upper Xingu region of central Brazil. And when archaeologist Michael Heckenberger published his findings in the journal Science in 2003, after years of mapping that landscape alongside the Kuhikugu people, who still inhabit the region, what he described was so far outside what the academic world expected to find that colleagues initially refused to accept the numbers. 50,000 people. That was the estimated population of Kuhikugu around 1400 CE, a metropolis in the heart of the Amazon 700 years ago. Walking along the avenues of Kuhikugu in 1400 CE would have been an experience few people would associate with pre-Columbian Amazonia. The main thoroughfares were 50 meters wide. 50 meters! For a clear point of reference, Brazil's widest modern highways average around 25 meters across. The avenues of Kuhikugu were double that. Open, cleared, and deliberately oriented to mark the solstices and equinoxes with astronomical precision. The sun rose and set exactly where the urban planning dictated it should appear, on specific dates in the calendar. Each settlement within the network was positioned following a formal spacing pattern. The entire system functioned as a single urban organism spread across hundreds of square kilometers. Planned as one thing, built as one thing, operating as one thing. And here is what makes Kuhikugu truly impossible to explain with what we know. To maintain a consistent solar orientation across an urban grid stretching more than 50 kilometers, you need precise astronomical knowledge. You need to be able to project that knowledge onto the terrain using instruments capable of maintaining consistency over enormous distances. You need a system for recording and transmitting the original plan as construction advances across decades. The peoples of Kuhikugu had no documented writing system, no metal tools, none of the resources we consider prerequisites for this level of planning. And yet the orientation is there, verifiable, measurable, real. Heckenberger directly compared the consistency of Kuhikugu's urban grid to the planned cities of ancient Rome, not as a metaphor, as a technical assessment. To move enough earth to build 50-meter avenues cutting through the forest, repeated across a network of 20 cities, without iron tools requires a level of labor organization that archaeology still hasn't fully explained. To coordinate the design of 20 different settlements without a written system for recording and transmitting the plan requires a method of information storage we haven't identified. The oral tradition of the Kuhikugu people preserves memory of the builders, calling them ancestors. But the specific knowledge of how the grid was conceived, how the solar orientation was calculated and maintained, how the plan was passed from generation to generation without paper and without metal, that knowledge is gone. It left the world with the last person who carried it. Kuhikugu was abandoned before Europeans arrived on the continent. No account from any early European explorer describes having encountered its ruins, or any living memory of it among neighboring cultures. A civilization the size of an ancient metropolis, with avenues wider than our highways and a verifiable astronomical alignment, disappeared without a witness. If Kuhikugu housed 50,000 people, how did 5 centuries of Amazonian exploration leave behind no record of its existence? If the solar alignment was intentional, who taught those engineers the astronomical precision required to execute it at that scale? And if a civilization that rivaled Rome existed in the Amazon less than 700 years ago, what happened to it? The forest consumed the avenues. Silence consumed the knowledge. And as we try to understand how Kuhikugu was built, the next discovery will show us something even more unsettling. Human faces carved with surgical precision into the bed of a river, cut by people who lived in a world where the Amazon was completely different from the one we know today. The submerged petroglyphs of the Amazon. It was September 2023 when the Rio Negro began to reveal what it had been hiding. The most severe drought in over a century was draining the Amazonian rivers in a way no one living in the region had ever witnessed. Boats ran aground in dry mud, where, weeks earlier, meters of water had flowed. Riverside communities lost access to supplies. Scientists monitored the water levels with a mixture of alarm and disbelief. And then, near Manaus, as the river kept dropping, something began to emerge from the depths. First a stone, then another. Then a human face carved into the rock with a precision that couldn't possibly be the work of chance. Then another face. Then spirals. Then fish in profile, etched with a clarity of line that 2,000 years underwater had not erased. The Rio Negro was surrendering a secret it had been keeping for 2 millennia. And it only had a few weeks before swallowing everything back down. Researchers arrived at the site within days. What they found along kilometers of exposed riverbank was a concentration of more than 1,000 individual engravings carved directly into the rock. Human faces with distinct expressions. Animals rendered with precise anatomical detail. geometric patterns repeating with consistency across the entire length of the site. The minimum estimated age, 2,000 years. And here is the detail that changes everything. These engravings were not gradually submerged over centuries of progressive flooding. They were carved by people standing on dry riverbank, on a river that ran at least 10 meters below its current level. Not 5 meters, not a few centimeters accumulated over time. 10 meters. The river we live alongside today is fundamentally different from the river those people lived alongside. Stop and let that sink in for a moment. 10 meters of permanent water separating their world from ours. This is not a seasonal variation, not a flood that came and went. Something permanently and dramatically changed the Rio Negro between the moment those engravings were made and now. Something that left no identifiable record in any historical source we've found. Climate science can explain water level variations across large timescales. What it cannot explain with precision is what specifically caused a change of that magnitude in this river during this period, so definitively that it never reversed. And the people who carved those faces into the rock lived in a world where that river was completely different. A world that no longer exists, and that disappeared without leaving testimony. And then comes the question that won't let go. Why there? Why carve human faces and spirals and fish into a riverbank rock with that level of detail and that scale if there was no guarantee that anyone beyond yourself and your contemporaries would ever see it, or was there? Some interpretations suggest the engravings may have been seasonal markers, visible only during specific drought periods when the river dropped low enough to expose them. Messages for those who knew when to look and where. Others suggest they were permanent records of territory, of history, of identity, made to endure regardless of who might see them. Neither interpretation has been confirmed. The river rose again before the research could be completed. The engravings disappeared back beneath 10 meters of water before the questions had time to be fully formed. The 2023 drought opened a window into a submerged world and closed it before we could fully step through. How many sites like this exist, permanently underwater in Amazonian rivers that have never dropped low enough to reveal them? If the Rio Negro ran 10 meters lower 2,000 years ago, what event caused such a permanent change without leaving any trace in any known oral tradition? And if the engravings were made to be seen only under the extreme conditions of a severe drought, who were the people who knew when and where to look? These questions remain unanswered, just as the questions about every civilization we've seen here remain unanswered. The builders of the Geoglyphs, the Marajoara, the Kasarabe, the peoples of Kuhikugu, all of them vanished. And the most unsettling question of all still waits to be answered. What destroyed them? Now, pause for a moment and think about everything we've seen. Perfect geometric shapes drawn into the earth by people who never saw them in their entirety. Rock paintings 11,200 years old that contradict everything science claimed about when humans first arrived here. Ceramics so sophisticated they appeared fully formed, with no identifiable origin. 26 cities hidden beneath Bolivia for 600 years. A network of 20 settlements aligned to the sun, with avenues wider than our highways, and human faces carved into rock beneath 10 meters of water. This is not a list of historical curiosities. It is a pattern of amnesia so complete that the greatest civilizations of an entire continent were erased from human memory as if they had never existed. They were not destroyed by us. They were lost before us. And what was lost along with them? The knowledge, the engineering, the astronomy, the agriculture, is a wound that science still doesn't know how to heal. Now I want to know what you think. Which of these 6 mysteries hidden by the Amazon jungle surprised you the most? Leave it in the comments below. And if you already knew about any of them before watching this video, tell me that too. I want to know just how far the knowledge goes among the explorers following this channel. If this video made you think, surprised you, or left you with more questions than answers, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Hit that like button. It really helps this channel reach more people who deserve to know these stories. Subscribe here and turn on notifications, because the next video goes deep into mysteries that official history would rather not discuss. If you made it all the way here, know that it's no coincidence. Thank you for exploring this world alongside me. Every video we make is an expedition, and it only makes sense with you by my side. The Amazon revealed its secrets today. On the next adventure, we go looking for more. I'm Curious Chris, and I'll see you on the next exploration.